Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source for Black news, Black views, and Black opinions. Today is Thursday, May 5th, and I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, will the leaked Supreme Court memo on Roe versus Wade affect the midterms? A new strategy Republicans want to try, but what topic is off the table? Meanwhile, a federal judge has signed off on a plea deal for Derek Chauvin. How many additional years will the former cop face? We have that story. Then, the Smithsonian Museum is adopting a new ethical return policy. We're going to tell you what famous artifacts are going back to their original owner.
Plus, a pastor is suing Kanye West, and we're going to tell you why. And Cardi B is all in her feelings, why the superstar is venting to her friends. We have all that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
The Republicans have a new midterm strategy, and it's don't mention abortions at all. Earlier this year, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell warned his fellow Republicans they could blow a sure thing in the midterm elections if they weren't careful. Now, at the time, McConnell was talking about Congress and some of their re-election campaigns. Now, he might be talking about how the leaked Supreme Court memo on Roe v. Wade will impact his party's chances of taking back both the House and the Senate. In a closed-door meeting this week, Senate Republicans discussed how to deal with the news of the leak. Many Republicans are worried the news could send a surge of Democratic women to the polls this fall. So instead of talking about abortion, GOP leaders want members to talk about who leaked the memo and who is to blame. There's no way that they can get around this for the midterm elections. And if Democrats were smart, what they would do is they would zero in on this as a talking point and make sure that they use this to push it all the way to the midterm elections, which are about 6 months from now. I can definitely see that.
But the problem is that Democrats don't always perform when it comes to issues that are very, very important. We talked about this before, Romeo, that the Democrats, they struggle with talking points.
Yes.
They struggle with talking points. The Republicans, they're getting these meetings together. They're already trying to strategize. How can they make sure they get to where they're trying to go? And so I'm a little bit worried about how people are going to feel, because at the end of the day, there are Black Republicans. And so this does show that when we're talking about Roe versus Wade affecting Black women, there are Black people that are also, this is like Whoopi Goldberg said, it's a human issue. So everybody is affected when we talk about abortions. It's not Black, it's not white. So this is going to be an issue for Black, white, Republicans as well. So I'm happy that they're, trying to figure it out, but also Democrats need to get above it, in front of it.
Yeah. Election season right around the corner. Democrats have to come up with a plan. There's a lot of things on the table that we're still waiting for them to get done. They have done some things, so we give them credit for that. But this is an angle they could use in their favor when it's time for the midterms, because a lot of people are feeling a little not sure if they're going to control the House and the Senate because of what's going on right now. If they want to keep it blue, this has to be part of their strategy moving forward.
Yeah, and I think the majority of the polls show that Americans want Roe v. Wade in place. They do not want it overturned. And if Democrats can get it right this time, you have, to your point, Demi, they struggle with talking points. But what other talking points do Republicans have? I mean, they are basically the party of obstructionists. I mean, they are for whitewashing education in schools, gerrymandering, hindering voting rights. So, and now with the Roe v. Wade thing, it's like more on top of that. So if Democrats can really hone in, they can really pull this one out.
Yeah. And based on a couple of things that's happened right now, we see that Trump is still relevant, right? And some people that he's mentioned, they're winning that ticket for the midterms. So you got to remember, they're going to come strong. They're going to probably ride on his coattail a little bit. So you got to have something to come back with.
And we shall see how the midterms all turn out. Now, 8 attorney generals around the nation are calling on President Biden to go further than forgiving $10,000 in student loan debt. In a letter to the president, AGs from New York, Illinois, Washington State, and 3 others, they want Biden to be bold. They want him to use his executive action to eliminate student loan debt for all borrowers. Now, the group of AGs, led by Letitia James in New York, commended the president for considering to get rid of $10,000 per borrower, but James says now is the time to help people crippled by debt. State attorney generals have been at the forefront of getting student loan relief for Americans.
In an effort to help Americans hurt economically, the White House will host a conference focusing on food insecurity. The conference will also focus on improving nutrition and ending hunger. It's the first time in 50 years the White House has had a conference on food insecurity. The United States saw higher than normal levels of food insecurity during the first few months of the pandemic. Checks from the American Rescue Plan given to millions of Americans laid off from the pandemic shut down. They helped them pay for food, though, but those checks stopped, and now people are struggling again. The conference comes as sky-high grocery prices make it tough for many families to make ends meet.
Well, unemployment is at its lowest in decades, and workers are being paid more than they have in years. But the American public has still a poor view of the economy and how President Biden is handling it. On a new CNN poll, it says that 23% of Americans think economic conditions in the country are somewhat good. That's down from 54% that said the same in December. Now, that same poll says 8 in 10 Americans have policies that hurt the economy. The pessimism in the economy is directly tied to inflation and high gas prices. Biden's approval rate is only at 41%.
The Trump Organization and the former president's 2017 inauguration committee have agreed to pay $750,000 to settle a lawsuit filed by the Attorney General of the District of Columbia. Carl Racine, he says the Trump International Hotel in Washington illegally received excessive payments from the inauguration committee. The settlement came with no admission of wrongdoing by Trump Organization officials. Racine, he says the $750,000 was paid to Mr. Trump's hotel by the nonprofit inaugural committee to rent out space above market rate prices. Now, the Attorney General says the space was then used to host a private reception for Trump's children on the evening he was sworn in as president. The settlement comes the same day Trump sold the hotel to the people who own the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York.
More bad legal news for the former president. Donald Trump must pay a $10,000 a day fine until a judge is satisfied he has complied with the subpoena. A New York appeals court ruled against Trump, who wanted to stay a contempt order. Trump has defied a subpoena from New York Attorney General Letitia James, who is seeking records for a civil investigation of his company. The New York Attorney General is investigating allegations the Trump Organization improperly manipulated the value of real estate that he owned.
And a federal judge has signed off on a plea deal for Derek Chauvin in his civil rights case for the death of George Floyd. A federal judge is accepting Chauvin's guilty plea, and he will spend between 20 to 25 years in prison. That clock will count down at the same time as his 22-and-a-half state sentence for the murder and manslaughter charges. That means Chauvin will serve an additional 3 years in prison on top of his initial sentence.
A small historically black town in Tennessee has reached a deal with the state comptroller's office. That agreement, which the NAACP described as a settlement, marks a victory for town officials. They argue the state was treating Mason's majority black leaders differently than they were white administrators who also struggled with finances. The issue began when the state comptroller's office had asked the town leaders to surrender their charter, pointing to ongoing years of financial mismanagement. Now, after Mason voters, they refused to do so. The comptroller's office said that the state would take over financial supervision. Town leaders quickly filed a lawsuit with the help of the NAACP. They won. The comptroller's office says Mason has agreed to work with a certified public accounting firm to improve its finances and pay down a debt to its utilities.
Round 2 goes to Shontel Brown, and the incumbent and congresswoman representing parts of Cleveland defeated Democratic activist Nina Turner for the second time in a year. Now, Brown crushed Turner Tuesday, capturing 66% of the vote. Last year, she beat Turner by 5 percentage points in the special election. Now, Brown will face Republican nominee and former East Cleveland Mayor Eric Brewer. During her concession speech, Turner teased the crowd by saying she was going to take her message around the country. She then said, 2024, it's coming.
The NAACP and other civil rights groups are suing Jacksonville, Florida, and Duval County, alleging new voting maps are weakening the black vote in parts of the city. The maps are for the city council and the school board. This lawsuit says the redistricting maps segregate black voters into just 4 districts. The civil rights groups say it's an attempt to weaken their influence over the elections. Now, black lawmakers in the state say it's part of Governor Ron DeSantis' plan for the state to weaken the black vote.
The Smithsonian Institution will allow its museums to start the process of returning items that were stolen or looted. The museum is adopting a new policy on ethical returns. In recent years, artifacts and artworks taken from Africa and other parts of the globe have been part of a discussion about colonialism, and racism. The museum has now formally authorized all of its museums to begin the process of returning those items from their collections that were taken unethically. The Smithsonian, which includes about 21 museums, and the National Zoo is preparing to return 39 Benin bronze statues to Nigeria more than a century after they were stolen. This is really great news for a lot of artists. A lot of artifacts are going to go back to where they should have been in the first place. And we're looking at a lot. The Benin bronzes, 39 of those are going to go back in centuries. So a lot of people might not even remember that where these artifacts have been at. This is going to be good for their families or whoever else to get them because they deserve to have them.
They definitely deserve to have them. And we have to remember that a lot of these artifacts were stolen during slavery. So not only did they steal people, they stole their riches and their artifacts and things. And they were sold, I believe these were first with the British. And then now, somehow they made their way to America. And it's just really glad that they're going back to where they came from, to Nigeria. I know France did it in November. They returned their artifacts to Nigeria as well. So, this is what should have happened. When you take someone's stuff that doesn't belong to you, you should give it back. And so I'm happy that the Smithsonian has enacted this new policy and they're doing that.
I love the fact that they have this new policy, like return those things. We're talking about reparations. It's all been a long time coming, right? Some kind of peace of mind, of what our ancestors went through, what was taken from them, what was stolen from them, from lives to artifacts. So I do applaud the Smithsonian for doing this as well.
And also it's going to be really great for those who go to the museum to look. You're not looking at something that was stolen or that is technically could be considered illegally here. You're looking at something that someone actually signed off. They want this in this place. And so that's also going to be a different viewing experience for those who go to museums also.
Yeah, and I think there's about like 155 million things that they have to go through. So there's a lot to sift through. And so not only Nigeria, we only know about Nigeria, but imagine the other countries that are going to get their items back, their artifacts back, and be able to put them in their own museum for their own people, you know?
It's a process. It's going to take some time, but, I'm sure those places are looking forward to it. All right, Evanston, Illinois has started giving out $25,000 checks as part of its reparation payments to some African-American residents. They are the first group of beneficiaries of the town's restorative housing program. 16 recipients were selected at random from people who could prove they live in Evanston as adults prior to 1969. The $25,000 grants can be issued to pay for home purchase, pay off a mortgage, or cover the cost of home improvements. The payments are a way for the city to address the effects of housing discrimination and redlining against black city residents.
An Alabama church that was once the center of the voting rights movements in the 1960s is now eaten up by termites and damaged by water leaks. Brown Chapel AME Church in Selma tops this year's list of endangered historical places from the National Trust of Historic Preservation. The nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. works to highlight and preserve sites that are in danger of being lost. Now, the Brown Chapel church member, she says the church shut down at the beginning of the pandemic and members found extensive damage when they returned. The building was constructed in 1908 and it was a starting point for the voting rights marches in 1965.
Black religious leaders around the country are being asked to show support for the LGBTQ plus community as it fights off legislative attacks from Republican lawmakers. Many Voices, a black church group, it says that it's time for black religious communities to support the gay community and its issues. It will be a challenge, however. The black church, like most other religious groups in the United States, is socially and morally conservative. More than 230 bills around the nation could limit the rights of the community. But 70% of black LGBTQ plus communities, they consider themselves to be religious.
A 73-year-old white Oklahoma woman says she was only kidding around when she called a fast food employee the N-word, then she slapped him. Yes, this is true. There's the surveillance video right there. You're going to watch it. The Oklahoma Little Caesars Pizza drive-thru. Lawyers for the 17-year-old black teen say Rachel Schumann was angry because the restaurant ran out of crazy bread. The young man says after she called him the N-word, she asked if it hurts his feelings, then she slapped him. It took place 2 weeks before arresting the woman, even though The video shows exactly what happened. Cops initially said they could not arrest the woman because they had not seen the attack with their own eyes. Chauvin has been charged with the malicious harassment based on a race, a misdemeanor in Oklahoma. We all saw this video, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. I think more and more we're getting this. First of all, I'm just glad that we have the surveillance cameras and the video, so we have proof this is happening. The way the young man handled it, I would applaud him for that, because a lot of people would not have handled it that way in the drive-thru.
Yeah, I was just listening to an unrelated video about Taco Bell employees, right? They got into an argument at the Taco Bell. The Taco Bell employee literally followed that person and did some harmful things to that person. So there are people that do not handle it the same way as this young man did. And so, Romeo, I'm happy that you acknowledged that he handled it the right way. Yeah. He walked away, took a couple breaths, because this could have ended really badly for this person. Like, you can't just go around putting your hands on people. One, you can't go around touching a person who's at work, trying to just make a living and pay for their family and pay for their lifestyle. This is simply not okay. Happy that that video is crystal clear.
Happy that the video is crystal clear, but let's also not forget that this was a teenager. So this is probably someone who is, working an after-school job, just trying to make some extra money, because after this happened, he went home and he told his parents what happened. And so they came back and they were able to watch the video and they turned it into police. Now, what bothers me the most is that it took 2 weeks. Agreed. 2 weeks for them to even do something. And then when they charged this woman, they charged her with harassment instead of assault, which is a lesser charge. And so what's crazy to me is after she did it, I don't know if y'all saw that, but she was smiling as if something like this was
she enjoyed it.
Like she enjoyed it, and like this was funny. And this is a young man, this is a teenager, and we have to remember, when our young people are going out into the world, and kudos to him for not jumping over the drive-through like I would have, and taking this back home to his parents. But could you imagine how his parents must have felt?
I agree, and I'm going to say this: she's 73. So what is she teaching her kids? What is she teaching her grandkids? If she took enjoyment out of using the N-word, smacking this young man, like, what's going on within that household or that family, right?
Absolutely, and honestly, me too. At 17, I was paying some bills at 17 working, so like I wasn't just going to school. It wasn't just extra pocket change. Like my jobs, I was actually, it was paying for stuff. So we really don't even know the makeup of how hard he's having to work, that you don't want to have to work hard and this happens while you're at work.
Yeah, no matter what, whether it's an after school job or whatever, he's still, learning valuable experience on the job. And she had no right to put her hands on him, and she had no right to call him out of his name, period.
I agree.
A Black Chicago man who was pardoned by the governor of Indiana has reached a settlement with the city. Keith Cooper spent 7 years in prison for a robbery he did not commit. Now he's reached a $7.5 million settlement which is the largest wrongful conviction in the history of Indiana. Cooper was pardoned in 2017 after being wrongly convicted in an 1996 robbery case where the teenager was shot and wounded. Cooper was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the robbery, but advances in DNA and nationwide offender database, it has excluded him now from the attacker and identified another person. The Indiana Court of Appeals overturned his co-defendant's conviction in 2005, and Cooper was given the choice of being released with a felony record or facing a new trial with the same judge. Cooper chose to be released in 2006, and now some 16 years later, he's finally being pardoned for the crime.